Hi, everyone, and welcome to my session. To build critical thinkers, we must truly teach writing. I'm Chris Lehman, founding director of the Educator Collaborative, and I'm happy to join you for this quick half hour. This is just one part of a much longer conversation, but I hope it leaves you with some ideas to think about your own practice, perhaps the curricula that you're using, and really focused on if we want to develop students who are critical thinkers in the world and can use their tools in order to communicate and express themselves, some things that we can adjust or consider in our teaching. So in this quick session, we'll have kind of three main parts. First, I'll start with I'll call it a check-in for us just to think about, so am I truly teaching writing? Again, based on maybe my own methods and structures, but also and especially those that are being asked of me with any mandated programs that some of you are using. What then second part, what are some key elements for truly teaching writing? And then lastly, I'll leave you with just a few thoughts to help you self-assess. As we're going along, if you have any thoughts or things that stand out to you, please feel free to type them in the YouTube chat, and I will try to respond as we go. All right, so part one, checking in on, am I truly teaching writing? So I'm a New Yorker. I also am just getting over a cold, so you might hear that in my voice, but I'm a New Yorker, and so I spend a percentage of my time on our subway system. And above the doors of a subway, there's often different ads that show up. Sometimes they're for lawyers, sometimes they're for college programs, sometimes they're for skincare. And in this case, it was for an AI company. And I saw this, I'll zoom in a bit here. I saw this and was horrified, uh, completely horrified. They had several different versions. This particular company, I've blocked them out because I don't want to provide them with additional advertising. But they had several different permutations of this. You can see the orange line at the bottom is their like solution to what I think they are posing as, I guess, a problem. In this case, it is creating a slide deck. And so on the black line, which again, I think they are posing as a problem, are all of the steps that a human would go through to create a slide deck for their job, for work, for college, for classroom, for whatever, to research the things that you want to put into the slide deck, to create an outline, to draft what would go on your slides, perhaps to add some charts, to polish it up, and then you have the final deck. And this AI company, through their advertising in the New York City subway, wants you to know that, oh, no, dear, they will handle all of the thinking for you. Apparently, you just type in one prompt and they can do all of that stuff and produce a final deck for you. Excuse me, it's my cold. This I find so horrifying that the way that this product is being presented to consumers is that you thinking is apparently a very, very, very bad thing. Yeah, like Kathleen is saying, I like the black line. Liza says, me too. Yes, to think that a solution to humans thinking, or we can apply this to our students thinking, is to just type into a machine and it'll do it for you, is really a focus on product, not process. It really is a focus on output versus thinking. And so if we are designing classroom environments and instruction for our students, uh, regardless of if they already are using AI tools, because there are many in secondary who are, one thing for us to consider is, what is it that we're actually teaching? If what we're teaching is just products, then it is easy to type into any sort of AI platform and ask for something to be produced, and sure, it'll produce a version of that for you if what we're focusing on are products. I'm going to argue for this session that really what we're teaching in writing is this keyword here, metacognition. what is the most essential part of writing is not the product itself. And I know that sounds a little, strange of, well, of course the product's important. You publish books, you publish magazine articles, you publish journals, you publish whatever, students publish their work. Of course the product is important. It needs to be legible and thoughtful and interesting, well organized, all the things that show up in standards language. Yes, all of that's true. But my argument for you here is that our teaching of writing is not about the product. It's about developing, increasing, and enhancing metacognition. How I think about my own thinking, how I talk about my own thinking, and how I use my thinking to produce writing or any composition, whether it's typing or it's video or whatever. So I'm going to use the term writing loosely here. But what I'm really doing is developing metacognition. And if I, as a student, internalize the kinds of decision making that someone has when they're writing a narrative, or the decision making that someone has when they're trying to justify a claim, or the decision making that someone has when they're trying to share information, if I internalize the metacognition involved in that, what decisions do I have to make? What questions do I need to ask? How do I evaluate how well I'm doing? It's here that we're trying to support our students. That is what gives them the tools to be thoughtful, higher order thinking selves across time. If our focus is just on product, students can go somewhere else to do it. If our focus is on metacognition, then we really are supporting them in their growth. Unfortunately, there are many, many, many mandated programs, several that are new on the market or newly revised. Partially, this is because of the push for quote unquote science of reading. There have been a lot of updated curricula that not only districts have mandated, but entire states have mandated, in the belief that this curriculum that's adopted is going to help kids understand foundational skills and apply their literate skills, and be stronger readers and writers. Unfortunately, what many practicing educators have discovered is that a lot of these programs do not do the things that they said they aim to do. Some of them actually very poorly teach science of reading foundational skills. But on top of that, a lot of the mandated programs and textbooks that are currently on the market do not truly teach writing. In many of them, and this is built over the last several years, but especially as state mandates have been happening, in many, not all, but in many of the most popular programs used in states right now, writing has really been pushed into this kind of like secondary, less important, extra place in the curricula. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. There is some writing. So if anyone who's published one of these curricula is like, no, there's writing in it. Yes, you will find the word writing, and the teacher has to say the word writing, and students are told to do writing, but it's often not truly teaching writing. Here are a couple of things to look for. Inside of textbooks and mandated curricula, if you are using any of those, language like this is often a good tell that the work is being assigned to students, but not actually taught to students. Some examples are tell students to write a summary of the article, or have students write a new ending to the story, or an all-time favorite, distribute, and then there's some handout, and have students fill it in. When mandated curricula tell you to just explain or just assign, that is often a good mark that that curricula is not actually teaching writing. If the teacher's guide is not giving explicit examples of how to teach students to do those things, then really you are assigning and not teaching. So I really like to have kind of like bookends, like to juxtapose two ideas when I work with schools and teachers. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I do understand that there can be some overlap between the two. They are not a clear, just black and white. However, I think it helps to have these kind of like two poles to think about so that we can really process and reflect on our teaching. So assigning versus teaching, assigning writing versus teaching writing. Assigning writing can be a good assessment. If you take any of those phrases that I just put up, so like have students write a new ending to the story, that can be a good assessment of do they understand um, narrative elements that you've been working on. You can see that. But that is assessing. That is not teaching. Or that's assigning, excuse me, not teaching. Assigning can, it often shows up in students are told what to do, but not shown how to do it. Usually assigning is short term. A lot of published curricula, but it doesn't only exist in published curricula. I'll show you some other examples in a moment, but a lot of published curricula has relegated writing instruction to like the last week of a very long unit, or like a thing that happens on Fridays, or like a one-time thing. Like you're going to write a response to this text only today. So assigning writing is usually shorter term. Assigning writing often has a preset format. There may be worksheets or certain elements that students need to use or respond to. There often is not a connection to a quote unquote real world process or product. If you're teaching students to write stories, whatever grade level they are, K through 12, that's a real thing that authors really do. They really write stories. If you're asking students to fill out a worksheet, that's not a thing that writers actually do. Now, there is room for scaffolding, but we have to be careful if we are assigning a task or asking students to do things. Here's another example, not from a mandated curricula, although there are versions of this too. You may have seen or may have used yourself versions of texts and sheets that look like this. This is a handout, my favorite vacation. It asks for name and date, and then it has these very discrete points to fill in. What's the place I went on vacation? I got up in the morning, and the next thing I did was, and then the rest of the sheet, there's some what I hear, what I see, there's different senses. A sheet like this, I argue, is not teaching writing. It also is assigning writing because it has predetermined the topic that students will use. Everyone's going to write about a vacation, regardless of if you've never gone on a vacation before, or maybe you don't have very good memories about vacation, or maybe you don't want to write about that. It's assigning the topic. It is not only assigning the elements that students must fill in, but it also is giving them the amount of space to use. I got up in the morning and box give students, maybe they could write one sentence or maybe two if they squish it up, but that's it. That's all the room that I have to fill things in. And therefore, it's controlling both what I write, how I write, and the amount that I could write, which means that it's taking away metacognition. I do not have to think about these elements. It's being given to me. And I'm going to say something, and maybe you'll agree with this, or maybe you won't like me for it, but it's my belief. Most sheets that have a silly little border are probably assigning and not teaching. I said it. If you are printing out sheets, or you see any of your colleagues that are printing out sheets that have a silly little border, there's a high % chance that it is assigning students to do something towards compliance. It's not allowing the space to learn metacognition and how to make decisions about writing. The same thing can happen even in secondary. So I know a number of teachers that will use slides. And so I love quick write prompts. I think that there is a place for them. However, understand a quick write prompt is assigning, not teaching. It allows students to produce a lot of writing. Maybe it gives them something interesting to write about, but it's not teaching them how to increase their writing skills if you give them a prompt. What is your favorite season and why? Assign students a task to do. It doesn't teach them how to do it well. Or homework assignments where students are doing most of their writing at home. Like this example, write a response to the question, choose a character from our novel. What argument would they make about forgiving someone? Make sure you have a claim, counterclaim, reasons, and evidence. That is, I mean, it's assigned for homework. So that is absolutely assigning because it is asking students to do something on their own outside of school. Now, in the past, maybe if we went back 5 years or more, students writing at home, there are many ways that they could have gotten help or support or plagiarized from online, but it still would be a lot of their own work. Now, what a lot of especially secondary teachers are seeing is that there are a number of students, and even into the college level, that when given a task to do at home, AI can often do it for them, just like that Subway ad. And so that gives even more reason why we have to be sure that we aren't assigning writing on purpose or accidentally. We really are teaching it. So if those are elements of assigning writing, what does it mean to truly teach writing? That's the next section that we'll look at here. So here are some key elements of writing instruction. I invite you to think about your own experience, your own work in the classroom. If there are other things that you would like to add to this list, certainly do. These are just some key elements in the short time that we have, but I think they're helpful to really make sure, are we teaching students how to write and how to write well and improving their skills, or are we just assigning writing? So here are some key elements, and then I'm going to look at some examples to break these down. Not all, but some. First one, most importantly of all, metacognition. Is thinking visible in your classroom in the act of writing? Are you as a teacher sharing your own thinking by what you write in front of them, by how you talk about their writing? Are students talking with you, not just about their product, but about their thinking? All of us as literacy teachers have sat next to students and corrected their papers or worked with them on fixing parts. An essential part of metacognition is not just telling, but asking. So what were you thinking in this part? Well, what in the room do you think could help you spell that better? Why did you put this part here? What are some things that you're working on to try to improve in your writing? The more questions that we ask to elicit their own thinking, the better we improve their own metacognition and student-to-student conversations. If students are talking about writing together and their decisions about writing, that's supporting their metacognition. Choice is a key element, all the way back from Donald Graves' research with young writers. The more that students have control to choose all or parts of their writing, the more we see their independence and the more we see how they apply their metacognition and critical thinking. Oh, okay, good. Looked like my window froze for a second. Oh, yes, it looked like it did. Okay, I'm going to close this and reopen it for just a moment. While I'm doing that, I'll go back to myself here. So choice is essential. Writing process is essential. Oh, yep, my Canva just closed out. Okay, I'm going to talk while I try to reload this. It should take me just a minute. Here goes. So choice is essential. So choice can include things like topic. That's one of the easiest ones to go to, and something that if you're a teacher of writing, we focus on and care a lot about. But the more that we're giving students additional ways that they are making decisions, so for example, around, okay, slides are coming back, around their format of what they're doing. Here's this again, perfect. Okay, around their format of what they're doing, around their topic, their organization, here we are. All of those choices not only help us see more of students, help them be more engaged in their writing, but also, and most critically, it helps us see them as they really are. What decisions do they make around organization? What decisions do they make around topic? Maybe even what decision do they make around form? Okay, we want to write an informational piece, but this informational piece is not just going to be an essay. You have choice over what form it will take. Will it be a PSA? Will it be slides? Will it be drawings? Will it be an illustrated book? If we're teaching writing, there's a writing process that we move students along, and we take time in class for students to write. If we had a lot more time, I could share with you different schedules that I have shared with secondary teachers that have limited time. But overall, whether you're elementary or secondary, it really is thinking, how am I preserving time in front of me in class for students to write, and that they write over time? There is certainly a time and place for writing within a day or a couple of days. If we're truly teaching writing, we're dedicating a longer amount of time over time. So let's take one of those examples and see what we can do with it. So here's that handout with the silly border. Again, apologize if you like silly borders. I usually don't. So with this handout, if we take those conditions that there's metacognition is active, there's choice, there's a writing process, and there's time, I can evaluate. So what could I take from what maybe I used to hand out and make some adjustments with it? So right off the bat, if I'm assigning to students a topic to use, I'm making a big assumption about what those students can and care writing about. So instead, I can look at that title or that topic that I'm assigning, write about the first time you lost your tooth, write about your favorite vacation, write about your pet, right? Like there's lots of topics we can assign. Instead, I can look back at my standards and see, so what is most essential here? What is it that I'm trying to teach? I guess what I'm trying to teach is narrative. So I can take a step back and instead of assigning a topic, I can plan for how do I move students along a writing process where they are coming up with their own topics for narrative. And standards are a good place to begin that can help give me some ideas and language around that. Next, I might look at this section of this worksheet and say, okay, well, what was this really trying to do? I can again look back to my standards and say, well, it seems like this was trying to help them organize their writing. That is part of most state standards around narrative writing is organization, how I put things in order, how I group ideas together. And so that must be what I'm teaching. I have to make sure I teach that explicitly instead of just assigning it. I can ask myself, what step of the process might this go in? Well, maybe I want students early on, like don't wait too long to start planning out organization. So that means I need a lesson or lessons around that. Instead of giving a handout to do it, I have to figure out how I'm going to teach that explicitly. And I could hold on to these sentence starters. They're not bad. I got up in the morning and the next thing we did was, but maybe I reserved those as sentence starters that I could give to students or put up on the wall of my classroom so that students have an option of something that they could draw from, but it isn't a requirement. So if I move from having that assigned work to really planning out the teaching of writing, I might do something like this. So I might, apologies 1 second as I cough. This cold is almost gone. So I might think about the process. Okay, early on in the process, I'm going to have students collect ideas for narrative writing instead of just assigning a topic. I need some opportunities to organize the story, so I might want a lesson or lessons around that. And I have to have students start drafting parts. If I set out a plan that I will, over the course of several days, not just assign, but show students how, that can help me to start plan out a unit. If I'm an elementary teacher and I have more time to teach writing in my day, then maybe I have several collecting lessons and several organization lessons and several drafting parts. If I'm a middle or high school teacher and I have less time in my week to teach writing because of my schedule, maybe I just have a day or two. Either way, these become explicit habits of mind. It's metacognition that writers can learn so that anytime they do narrative writing, they have something to go back to. So let's take the example of one of the possible lessons for collecting ideas. Writers think of times they've had with people that they care about. If I am truly teaching writing, I need to model both the act of writing and my own thinking. Tech got a little messed up for a second there, so I'm not even going to try to share my screen with you of me handwriting, but I can talk through. If I'm truly teaching writing, it might look something like this. I might say to students, so instead of just write a topic, I can say, so today we're going to try to come up with ideas that we could write about in our own stories. One way that we can do that is by thinking of times that we've had with people that we care about. So I have my writing next to me here. You all have your notebooks or devices. I'm going to start with a T-chart, and I'm going to list out people that I care about. So my mom, my sister, my kids, Now, if I'm writing for elementary school students, I like to think about people that I care about when I was their age. If I'm writing for secondary students, I try to think about people I cared about when I was their age. So while I don't live in my old neighborhood, if I'm writing for younger students, I might add to that list friends that I had in my neighborhood back then. So I could say my friend Derek, who lived a few houses away. So I could have a list of people I care about on one side of my T chart, and then model for them my decision making. How do I come up with times that I've had with them? And I could start to populate that. So my thinking could sound like, all right, times that I had. So like with my friend Derek, there were lots of things that we would do. And sometimes there's a big group of us. But one time I remember where we were playing on the swings at the park, and a bee stung his hand. That was a really surprising, shocking moment that shocked both of us. And so I could write about that. Excuse me while I'm back. So I could write about that. In my teaching, if it truly is teaching writing, I want to make sure I'm not just assigning topics or work for students to use. Instead, I really am showing my own metacognition through strategies and through my thinking while I write, that I'm allowing choice. So they're going to decide on the people or topics that they might list and try to write about. And I'm moving them along a multi-day process where they write in class. So as we're getting to the end of our brief session here, I want to give you some tools to help assess your own writing instruction. And again, it could be structures, habits, and routines that you have initiated for yourself in your teaching, but it also could be because of a mandated program that you're using. And so these are some questions that you could ask yourself, talk about in your colleagues when you're thinking about your instruction together, or even with your leaders. So some things to self-assess if writing instruction is going well. The first two essentially important and good barometers. One is volume. As you look at students writing across the year, are students writing more than they were earlier in the school year? If you see the amount of writing that they're doing in one sitting or across time increasing, you're probably teaching writing. If you notice that their volume is stagnant, there were students who were writing only a little bit at the start of the year, and now it's like October, November, they're still only writing a little bit. Now it's January, they still are writing only a little bit. It would be important to look back at, so are we more assigning than teaching, and how do we adjust that? Stamina, can students write for longer periods of time? Independence, this is so essential because it's what all the standards hinge on. Without your support, are they able to apply the lessons that you're teaching them? And that feedback loop of giving them a lot of choice and space so that they can play with what you've taught allows you to then assess how well is my teaching sticking. And that's a good indication not just of their readiness, but also of your clarity. If I see a bunch of students aren't applying some of my recent lessons, I want to know that so that I can work on making my teaching perhaps more explicit, or making the tools easier for students to use. Or maybe I have to take away some scaffolds because maybe I'm over scaffolding. And so they're not increasing their volume or stamina or independence because I'm almost doing too much for them. All of those are a good barometer for yourself. And then I think the most important one of all, confidence. Are you seeing your student writers more joyful around writing, more confident around writing, and more engaged in writing? Because that's the tool. If I go back to So-sun's keynote, that is the tool that allows them to share their experiences, their lives, their ideas in the way that this current generation absolutely wants to, needs to, and feels the need to. If my writing instruction is truly doing justice, my students will feel stronger and more able to share their own thinking. So thank you for joining this really brief session together. Certainly there is a lot more that we could talk about together around the teaching of writing. If you found this session valuable, please do pay the joy forward. I will, let's see if I can find it here. I'll put the QR code up at the top of the page. Today, what you would have spent to grab a cup of coffee or to pay for registration, please consider paying that forward to one or all of our charities of the day. You can find me on social media at Chris Lehman. I also consult with schools. So if you would like to do more work around writing, reading, language, whatever, into this next school year, or anyone who's been presenting today, please do reach out. Go to TheEdCollab.com. You can find more information about our consulting services, but you also can just reach out with any questions or ideas that you have. Thank you all for attending. Now it's time to go over to your next session. Enjoy the rest of your gathering day. I will see you at the closing in about a half hour. Take care, everyone.